We're now going to open it up for Q&A. So maybe Sarah will just scroll through the chat and kind of take these one at a time. I think you tackled Lonnie's question about deed restriction already.
Yeah, and Diana added a even better explanation of the 55-year deed restriction and then opportunities to extend that deed restriction clock.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I see a question here, or comment from our good friend Pete about prioritizing cars over nice streetscapes. We couldn't agree more. Christine asked, can you give a few examples of cities with good objective design standards? Yes. I personally find the city of Palo Alto's objective design standards very visual and very easy to follow as a designer. I think there are some items in there that can actually affect the yield of units on the site. They have some pretty large facade breaks that actually are like the size of a studio apartment unit stack that I think could be reduced, but it's extremely easy to follow. I also live in Fort Collins, Colorado, and our new land use code update that we just employed is similarly visual and very form-based, easy to follow, diagrammatic. So both of those are great examples. Other cities that we work in, Redwood City, for example, have pretty clear objective design standard bits as well. They're just not represented quite as visually as the Palo Alto example. But I think a lot of California cities, Bay Area cities in particular, are really embracing the challenge set forth by streamlining legislation that requires affordable housing developments to just stick to a set of objective standards and go through a ministerial approval, and are providing clear expectations of what they want to see in order to be able to go through that quick process. And we really do applaud those planning departments and those city staffs for taking that challenge in good faith.
Agreed. Yeah, I've worked through the San Jose's objective design standards, and they're also clear and easy to work with. The interesting thing about, every project, there's likely going to be one or two objective design standards that just don't make sense for that project. And so one of the benefits of the streamlining and state density bonus processes that can be utilized for affordable housing design is that there's usually the opportunity to use a concession, which allows you to, or multiple concessions, which allow you to not follow some of those objective design standards if you can provide an explanation of why that financially limits your ability to provide the number of housing units you've indicated. And then there's also variances that can be discretionary reviewed by the city staff if there's something that just isn't feasible for the project to comply with.
Concessions and waivers are our friend. There's a comment here from Lonnie. It would be nice to see a small market in developments that are further from shopping in order to reduce automobile use, which is a top contributor to our climate crisis.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Go for it, Sarah.
I was thinking about this one. Some of our clients are more amenable to incorporating some amount of mixed use, and sometimes it's required based on where the project site is to be mixed use. It can be difficult to finance a commercial or retail space because it's not a typical component of affordable housing financing, and then there's also the risk of times when that space is not being rented and not impacting the long-term operational budget of the project. However, some of our clients are totally on board and figure out creative ways to make that work and are able to incorporate some amount of mixed use. We have a project that has a 7-Eleven on the ground floor. It's also right next to the light rail, so it really is leaning into the livability and transit-oriented connectedness for those residents.
Absolutely.
We have a project, I think Lee Avenue, we shared a little bit about, that serves seniors who are exiting chronic homelessness. And that site, we've looked at different ways of providing better connection to the surrounding retail. It's on a too busy street, so I'm really thinking through what is the pedestrian access to get groceries. And then if that's not a great option, are there things like intentional vending machine opportunities that can provide basic like pharmaceutical products on site or healthy food opportunities on site. Those are some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, and that project is also mixed use. It has medical office suites on the ground floor. Let's see.
Lonnie also spoke about in that same comment about shuttle access And some of our projects do opt for providing an alternative means of transit for residents. Kate, I'm not sure what the specific parameters are for Mitchell Park, but I know that there's the opportunity for paratransit.
Yeah.
for residents.
We have dedicated paratransit parking, and I believe that project also has like bus passes for everyone living there. Don't quote me on that if any of our clients are on the call, but I think that we ended up incorporating that. So our developer clients do have creative ways to support residents who might not have cars, which depending on the population can be quite a high percentage of the residents. But again, all of this adds cost to the overall development, and for things like bus passes does add an ongoing maintenance cost. So it's always that kind of affordability balance that they're playing against. Let's see. Pete said, until recently, Santa Cruz has been pretty low-rise town and is adjusting to bigger buildings, hard for some locals. Any thoughts or anecdotes on how having more and more diverse neighbors makes communities richer?
Internet must have cut out for a moment.
Oh,
chime in. So Pete, you commented that Santa Cruz has been a pretty low-rise town and adjusting to bigger buildings is hard. Are you back, Kate? Oh, you're muted.
I am. My Zoom just crashed. That's never happened to me before.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't during the presentation part.
Sorry, everyone.
I was following up and digging into the question from Pete about anecdotes on how to help neighbors think about larger buildings coming into their neighborhoods and allowing more opportunities for diverse neighborhoods and how that makes our communities richer. So I was speaking about how we usually start with empathy building as a tool in our community engagement process. So we'll ask questions, if we're in a public venue or engaging with a cross section of neighbors around a property site, we'll ask questions about like who are the people that would be best served by affordable housing in this community, and let them vote or name some of the populations they think would be best served as a way of building empathy and thinking about those future residents. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Absolutely. I'm thinking of a project that we have right now that has a lot of retailers who have kind of moved into the area anticipating the higher density of residents that are going to be moving to the area as a result of our development and other multifamily developments nearby. So emphasizing things like there will be more public transit ridership. There will be more retail opportunities because there will be more people here to shop at those retail opportunities. So there are certain benefits to being in a more dense area in terms of population that will attract those kind of community amenities rather than individual building level amenities that might be attractive to folks who are otherwise sort of, fearful or anxious about having more people living in their neighborhood who weren't there before.
Rafa added a comment on this thread of sharing a personal story about why the housing is beneficial to yourself or a loved one is a powerful way of building empathy and community engagement. And that's a great example. On one of our projects we're doing community engagement on right now, one of the focus populations is educator workforce, including teachers. And so in one of our working sessions with the teachers, we asked them to share about their housing stories. Was it hard to find housing? Is it hard to find housing? Tell us a little bit about that. And so we have these stories that we can use when we go and talk with the neighborhood about who it is we're serving and why this building will address such a desperate need in our communities.
Okay, let's see. We have a comment from Heather here with looks like kind of a personal apartment configuration. If it's all right with you, Heather, I think we're going to follow up with you offline because that's a pretty specific apartment configuration question that we'd love to kind of dig in with you a little bit more.
My 2-word response is look into barn doors. Those can be code compliant and a great opportunity for separating spaces.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's see. Thank you for the compliment, Carolyn. We appreciate it. And then Christine, do you have any advice for cities or sites without good public transportation? Have you ever done a car share program as part of a project, for example? I can't think of a project that we have a car share program on. I know they're a little more common in San Francisco. But we do take into account the local vehicular context of our project sites, as do our clients. Sarah, do you want to chime in on that a little bit more? I feel like you have some of the more sort of car-centric projects in our portfolio at the moment.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting idea. And I feel like it's come up in the past, but I don't have any current projects that are considering that as an option. That's an interesting idea, though. I feel like, thank you for that idea, Christine. We'll bring that up with some of our clients because that could be a really useful resource for something that doesn't need a dedicated car for just themselves and would be interested to having a buy into a car share program that's located parked in the building. Over the years, there's been various attempts at helping with the parking, providing parking, but not taking over the building or adding too much cost to the projects. There was kind of a trend of using parking stackers in tighter footprinted buildings. What those do is allow you to have a ground level layout of parking spaces, but then these parking stacker machines that can move a car up or down in some cases to basically double stack a parking space. So you can not quite double, but potentially increase your parking count pretty substantially without making the parking garage bigger or 2 stories. Those are kind of rolling out in a lot of our projects that are finishing construction right now. So we'll continue to see how those serve the residents and if it's an effective opportunity or way of increasing parking, but not increasing the space needed for parking. They are complex machines and they do need to be maintained over the years. So it can add some cost to the operation budget. But that is a creative parking solution that's been implemented. But yeah, I think it's mostly about choosing locations that have access to good public transportation or are adjacent to planned bike pedestrian paths. We have a project in Cupertino right now that's actually will incorporate a portion of a pretty robust bike pedestrian trail network through town. And so that's a really exciting way of allowing residents to rely on non-vehicular means of transportation that aren't also public transportation, just using their own body power, human power.
Yeah, we have sites that are immediately across the street from a grocery store and other shopping. So it's really more about smart siting and making sure that the context matches the resident population as much as possible as well. Let's see. Question from Rafa, why does affordable housing that receives tax credit financing often cost significantly more to construct than market rate housing? Do you see this as a problem? Yeah, this is our slide on that. It's so many factors. Do I see it as a problem? I think it's the water that we swim in, and it is a challenge that affordable housing developers have embraced. Of course, the construction and labor requirements, the third item down here is one big, easy to point to reason why affordable housing costs more to build than market rate housing. But do I think it's a problem that the folks who are building our developments are being paid a living wage? No, nor do our clients really. And the nice thing about the way that the affordable housing tax credits are structured is that every project is playing by the same set of rules in California, and every project is playing under these same constraints. So there's not a project that is disadvantaged by having livable wages for the workers building it. There's not a project that's disadvantaged by incorporating green and sustainable solutions because they're all being incentivized to do that by the same programs. But they can be more costly to build than market rate housing for all the reasons listed here. So it's really just something to keep in mind when the public is clamoring for, a 2-to-1 parking ratio and asking for an underground parking garage, like that makes it even more expensive to build than market rate housing. And when we want some twisting sculptural building form that makes it even more expensive. So embracing those cost saving opportunities where we can find them so that we can apply the budget that we do have in ways that are most meaningful to the people who are going to be living there.
Yeah, I think there's some real benefits between the way we finance and build affordable housing and the way market rate housing is financed and built. Like there's kind of lessons learned on both sides of the equation, to the point of, tax credit, affordable housing costing more. And facing that reality is that it's challenging our industry to get creative in how we can find opportunities to pull down the cost of construction. A lot of developers, affordable housing developers and design teams have explored modular construction and finding, is there cost savings in cutting the schedule of construction, and bringing out modular components of the building. There's volumetric versions of that, a whole unit being brought in by a truck versus like just modular components like of a floor system or a wall system. Or we have a project we're trying to do a modular component of a plumbing wall inside of a unit with the appliances, or I'm sorry, the casework attached to it, so you can just slide that in to the unit after being built in a factory prior. It's also, I had another example. Just streamlining legislation. The faster we can get to construction, the less amount of escalation can happen. So if we can get through planning entitlements, if we can get through building permit processes faster, it gets us to that starting point of construction where we can lock in the cost before more time has expended and costs have continued to rise. Because as you'll note, costs only go up over time. They never come back down. Sometimes they will plateau, but they never come back down. So the faster we can get to locked in bid and construction start, the better for the overall cost of the project.
The next question's a doozy. We could spend our next half hour going into that. If we want to focus just on laws that were passed in 2024, I'm looking up some of our favorites here. A lot of the ones that passed this year are renewals or enhancements to some of our favorites. Like, it'll strengthen SB 35, it'll strengthen SB 4, it'll strengthen AB 2162. I feel like the golden age of passing streamlining legislation was probably 5 years ago in California. Other states are trying to catch up. Other states where we practice are trying to catch up. And now we've had the benefit of these kind of case studies of projects that have used that first tranche of streamlining legislation and have found little loopholes here and there. So closing out how much the Coastal Commission can resist doing X, Y, or Z, and trying to really solidify the law to make the intent very clear that the intent of these laws is not to provide pathways to prevent housing from being constructed. I'm excited about YIGBY. Sarah, I feel like you and I have talked about this a lot as well. I don't know if you want to talk about like housing on religious lands.
Yeah, I think that's Kate's referencing SB 4, which was passed at the beginning of the year, that basically allows faith-owned property to have housing built by right on their property, and so it can't be precluded as through the approval process to build housing on a faith-owned property. I think also university land, or is it community college land, I think as well, is included in that. But basically what that does is, our faith-owned communities are ever in transition as our society's needs transition over time. And so we are at a point where there are congregations or other groups that have large facilities, large pieces of land that are at the heart of their communities that are maybe underutilized, or there's just opportunity to add more to those sites. And so the idea of layering housing into a rich community-oriented facility already is a dream come true. I think it just makes for really cool opportunities for those organizations to serve their community with a tangible thing like providing more housing, and just create a higher usage of that really valuable real estate in our communities. So really excited about that. We're partnering with a few clients to evaluate alongside faith organizations the opportunity of layering housing into their properties.
If we may hype one piece of legislature we're excited for this coming year, it is the BAFA Bay Area Housing Bond. If we want to keep building affordable housing, it truly must pass. So we will post a little link into the chat about that bill. Yes, to BAFA, we've got some fans in the house.
There we go. Love it.
Yeah, and the statewide bond is crucial as well. We are honestly, we had some regions that passed some incredible regional housing bonds in the past, and those funds are simply spent at this point. And so we really do need that next great financial move on the part of our state and our region in order to keep affordable housing moving along in our area. Oh, I did not know that it doesn't apply to Santa Cruz County.
I thought for sure Santa Cruz County would be included in the
Today I learned.
9 counties.
You guys are making us smarter.
Good job. Good to know. You're on our way, Pete. That's what we need to advocate for next.
Right.
Lonnie had a comment up here, but I haven't read through it fully. About having close proximity, access to open space and community gardens, providing much needed connection to the earth and seasons, growing food, agreed 100%.
Absolutely. Agrihood is a great example. Yeah, and we, one conversation we find ourselves involved in a lot is conversations around missing middle housing, and bringing, some folks like to call it gentle density. We just like to call it a greater variety of housing options to single family neighborhoods. And we think projects that add density to single family neighborhoods are one of the best mechanisms we have for preserving the open spaces that do still exist in our cities and in our communities, because if we don't, then the only other option is sprawling into those open spaces. And we completely agree that the donut of lawn around each single family home is not a wild open space. Whereas if we can have a quadruplex on that same lot, that those 4 lots next to it that aren't being used can remain wild open space. So thinking about how we speak about missing middle housing as a correlating environmental open space benefit has been a really effective way for us to talk about housing to people who might not ordinarily otherwise have a stake in the game. Sierra Club's environmentalists, really bringing them on board with understanding housing as a bigger piece of the environmental puzzle has been an effective communication tool for us.
Yeah, and we're incorporating community garden spaces in a lot of our projects, particularly projects that serve senior populations. That's usually a really prioritized amenity to provide, as well as permanent supportive housing. To the points that you pointed out, Lonnie, in your description, there's a lot of therapy in connecting to the earth, growing things to the seasons. And so providing a space on the property for people to garden and grow things is a great healing tool. 100% agree with that.
And can help combat food deserts as well. I mean, to the earlier point about what about sites that aren't in amenity rich areas, growing your own food on site is one of the most immediately local ways to have fresh fruits and vegetables. And honestly, just flowers, natural beauty. All right, friends. I think the questions are slowing to a trickle, and we'd love to give you back as much of your day as you like. So thank you for attending. Thank you for your really thoughtful discussions in the chat. We're very grateful to all of you for coming. And we hope that you share something that you learned today with someone in your housing network. But thank you.
Yes, thanks everyone.